It has been said that all that is necessary for evil to thrive is for good people to stand by and say nothing. Yet again, we find ourselves in this country grieving because of the insane act of a human being who decided that it was an appropriate thing to take an automatic weapon and lots of pistols and go into a temple, and having shouted an anti-Semitic phrase, start killing people wholesale simply because they were Jewish, because they were other. And inevitably, when these things have happened in our country, what we find is immediately people begin to go to their corners to protect their personal perspectives about whether or not they think guns are good or bad, or how it is that we should be screening people who own guns, etc. We tend to be a people right now who want to find simplistic answers to complicated questions. The fact of the matter is that most of the people that are killing wholesale in this country are white young men. Most of them are disenfranchised, most of them are mentally ill, and yet we don't pay attention to any of the things that led them to those places. We pay attention to the actual symptom, the cause, the gun. I'm not a big fan of guns, but I'm not opposed to guns either. What I am opposed to is those of us who follow Jesus Christ saying time and time again that we are going to ignore these things because we want to protect something we think is very important to us. I remember years ago there was a phrase, people wore them on little rubber bands around their wrists. What would Jesus do? You remember them? That was a very popular thing. What would Jesus do? What would Jesus do? I always thought it was kind of an inane thing to ask the question, what would Jesus do? Because Jesus was perfect, is perfect. Jesus understood all things in a way that you and I can't understand them. So I think that the more appropriate question for those of us who are followers of Jesus Christ is to ask the question, what would Jesus have us do? And I cannot believe that Jesus would say, for the purpose of protecting a personal right, that it is okay to kill children in schools, and that it is okay to watch young people in colleges die, and that it is okay to see people who are at a celebration and a concert in Las Vegas to be killed, or that people who are in a black church in South Carolina should be killed, or people that are in a Jewish synagogue in Pittsburgh, it's okay for them to be killed, and that the answer is more guns. That's a simplistic approach to a complicated question. Now, why is it that I started with that saying that all that is necessary for evil to thrive is for good people to sit by and say nothing? We tend to get very quiet and very passive when we are challenged to do things that make us uncomfortable. When we are challenged to look at our own values and our own connections to the teachings of Jesus Christ and find out where they are strong and find out where they are weak and try to figure out how it is that we might shore them up. In this dialogue, this national dialogue that we ought to be having right now, it ought to be about common sense gun control. The Second Amendment is designed to protect us, not to make it possible for us to be killed wholesale. So then what can we do to help the Second Amendment do precisely what it was intended to do by our founding fathers? But how can we also address mental illness in this country? How can we begin to teach people to be alerted to the signs that allow these things to happen? Because they don't happen in a vacuum, and they don't happen spontaneously for the most part. Someone somewhere saw something in this man that, had they recognized it, they might have been able to do something that would help his eternal soul and certainly prevent the grief and the agony and the pain that the people in Pittsburgh are experiencing right now, but that we all ought to be experiencing, because do you know what? It can happen anywhere. And are we only going to get up in arms when it happens in our own backyard? Somehow our lives in this place more important than the lives of the children in an elementary school or the people in the synagogue yesterday? What would Jesus have us do? Today's passage about the blind man when Jesus is going by speaks to something that I think is important for us to understand about those of us who follow Jesus and what it is that God asks of us. Every single time in Holy Scripture, when Jesus is asked to heal someone, do you know that what he does is he asks that person to participate in their own healing? So the blind man, where he makes spittle in dirt and mud and he puts it on the man's eyes, he tells him to get up and go and wash. He told the man who was looking for sight today to get up and come to him. He told the woman who was the adulterer, after she had been threatened by death with stoning, when he had dismissed all of those who were willing to throw those stones, because after all, she was an adulterer and they must have been perfect and sinless. What did he say to her? Nobody here judges you, nor do I. Go and sin no more. Jesus asks us in every aspect of our relationship with him and with each other to not be passive. Passivity is perhaps one of the most dangerous things, second in my opinion to gossip, that we can engage in our lives. Jesus calls us to be active followers. In order to follow somebody, you must get out of the pews and you must follow. In order to make disciples of all people, you must be willing to invite and to share your stories about why this place is important to you, about how it has changed your lives and deepened your relationships with God. For those of you who think that it is my job to do that, you are sorely mistaken. That is not what I get paid for. Look at my vows. My job is to work within the church, to prepare the saints to go and do the work that God has given us to do. My job is not to entertain you on Sunday morning and go and do the work myself. If we are to be healed as a community at Grace from the years of division and destruction which has gone on in this place, from the years of the conflict and the separation and the going out, then we must stop being passive. We must say, this evil will exist no more in this place because I will be transformed. I will go and do the work that God has given us to do. I will no longer wait on someone else to do it for me. And by extension, when one more of these tragic events happens in our culture and in our communities, we must say enough. But prayers and thoughts are not going to do it. You must become active in the conversation. You must write your congressmen and your elected representatives. You must go to meetings. You must protest in the streets if necessary to stop this insanity, because it exists because good people allow this evil to thrive. And Jesus would not have us do that. Jesus would have us examine closely, with great scrutiny, how it is we can put our head on a pillow at night or look ourselves in the mirror and say, this is just a terrible, tragic thing. I'll pray about it, but oh well. It is the nature of our world today. It is the nature of our world today because we allow it. And trust me when I tell you, what we allow is what we will have.